Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely thrilling blueprint for the future of our socioeconomic structure. We're going to take some pretty dense economic policy and, honestly, turn it into a fascinating engineering problem. We'll be looking at a totally new framework designed to completely rethink how wealth is generated, held, and protected over the next 20 to 50 years. Let's get right into it.
So to kick things off, let's look at an incredibly powerful framing from our source material. This really sets the baseline for everything we're about to discuss. A sovereign wealth fund at the individual level. Just think about that for a second. Instead of a nation's wealth sitting solely in a central treasury or being completely absorbed by private corporations, what if every single citizen held a direct, non-dilutable equity stake in the aggregate profitability of the country? Well, that is exactly the core idea we're unpacking today.
We're going to build this socioeconomic blueprint step by step. First, fixing the wealth disconnect. Second, the NDEHU core engine. Third, the rules of redemption. Fourth, stress testing the system. And finally, looking at the 50-year horizon.
All right, Section 1, fixing the wealth disconnect, specifically the GDP versus wage growth gap.
The crucial point here is that we desperately need a way to ensure that as corporate productivity rises, the working population isn't just left behind. Right now, there is a massive decoupling going on. A country's GDP can absolutely skyrocket, but the real wage growth and wealth of the average citizen, it often stays totally flat. So the main challenge is figuring out how to build a sort of capitalist-socialist synthesis. We want to retain those free market incentives for businesses to grow, but structurally guarantee that the public actually gets to share in that newly created wealth.
Moving on to Section 2, the NDEHU core engine, and equipping every citizen.
Now, NDEHU stands for National Developmental Economic Holding Units. Imagine being granted an absolute bankruptcy-proof safety net that grows right alongside the nation's GDP. It's an equity-based system that directly links the general public's wealth with the nation's economic productivity. And the best part? It is completely independent from traditional wages. The allocation is actually beautifully simple. You and every other living citizen are issued exactly 1,000 of these units right at birth. And they are strictly non-transferable. You can't trade them, you absolutely cannot sell them off to some hedge fund, and they can't be inherited either. They are tied directly to your national identity for as long as you live.
This really illustrates the elegance of the whole engine because it's a pure pass-through model. These units are funded by a 1 to 10% national tax on all corporate net profits, which gets placed right into a ring-fenced sovereign reserve. The value of your 1,000 units floats dynamically. So every single month, the total reserve pool is divided by the total number of active units. Because payouts come strictly from collected taxes sitting in that reserve, it can never bankrupt the state. This is absolutely critical to understand. The government bears zero debt or fiscal liability for this program. If corporate profits go down, well, the unit value simply floats downward right along with it.
Okay, Section 3, the rules of redemption, focusing on purpose-bound spending.
To make sure this capital actually builds society rather than just being wasted, you can only deposit units with the government for cash to fund specific developmental needs or emergencies. We are talking about critical things like higher education, medical treatments, or funding a pre-approved business startup. Crucially, there is a strict block on using this for amusement or general consumer goods. No buying flat-screen TVs with this fund. And this entire redemption process is managed through a programmable digital currency, like a purpose-bound e-rupee, which locks the funds specifically to verified merchants. It's really fascinating how the system gamifies the rules to protect a minor's capital. You obviously don't want parents draining their child's future safety net, right? So for children ages 0 to 12, parents can only tap into a maximum of 10% of their own NDEHU for the child's needs. Then, between ages 12 and 18, up to 50% of the child's units can be accessed, but only for locked developmental purposes. This essentially ensures that every single 18-year-old enters adulthood with a heavily protected, heavily funded financial foundation of 1,000 units, totally ready to unlock.
Now, life happens, and people will inevitably need to cash out their units for emergencies. But the system actually allows you to buy them back, up to your 1,000-unit cap. If you face a crisis and have to cash out, the system gives you a 2-year runway to get back on your feet and buy your units back at the exact flat price you sold them for. Between years 2 and 5, the rebuy price is the original price plus 50% of the difference to the current market value. After 5 years, you pay full market price. This perfectly protects vulnerable citizens from getting punished by sudden market surges right after an emergency, while at the same time preventing wealthy citizens from just day trading their units.
Let's jump into Section 4, stress testing the system. We're going hunting for glitches.
So here is the first punch, and honestly, the ultimate systemic caveat.
What stops multinational corporations from using clever accounting to report zero net profit? Giving out massive executive bonuses, massive stock buybacks, or inflated perks to avoid the tax? Because if they do that, the public pool dries up entirely. The funding mechanism completely fails.
Well, the system patches this loophole perfectly with something called the Alternate Minimum NDHU Tax, or AMNT. It essentially forces a choice. You can either report clean, transparent net profits and pay the standard statutory rate, or, if your business spends more than 10% of its expenses on employee, executive, or shareholder benefits while miraculously reporting less than 10% net profit, you face a direct, flat 10% tax on that entire benefit pool. It completely neutralizes that old accounting evasion trick.
Let's look at the next stress test. Anytime you restrict how cash is spent, gray markets usually form almost instantly. So, what stops a citizen from buying a fake course with their NDHU, paying a corrupt institute, and having that institute hand them untraceable cash back under the table?
Because the digital currency used for redemptions is fundamentally programmable, cashback scams become, well, mathematically impossible. The smart contracts running the currency will automatically reject any transfer to a non-verified vendor wallet. You can only spend it at registered hospitals, accredited universities, or verified business suppliers. There's literally no physical cash to hand back, which completely does away with the need for a massive, expensive regulatory state to audit every single transaction.
Okay, let's look at human behavior over a lifetime. Remember earlier when we said units are non-hereditary? You can't put them in a will. So wouldn't everyone just cash out 100% of their units right before they pass away so they can gift the liquid money to their kids or grandkids?
Not quite. Because the spending of the digital currency has to match the individual's own verified services, an 80-year-old cannot legally generate an invoice for a 10-year-old's schooling using their own units. They literally can't drain the pool for their heirs. Instead, their passing initiates what's called the post-mortem contraction. Any uncashed units are pulled back to the central reserve. The total active unit supply shrinks, but the tax revenues sitting in the reserve stay exactly the same. This creates an incredible demographic yield multiplier. It means the passing of units automatically increases the wealth of every single remaining living citizen.
Finally, Section 5, the 50-year horizon and the macro dynamics at play.
Over a half-century, a natural two-tier dynamic will emerge just based on human behavior, which our sources refer to as the wealth divergence split. The system absolutely guarantees a lifetime poverty floor for everyone. However, working-class families might frequently cycle their units in and out, using that 2-year buyback window we talked about to fund life milestones or emergencies. On the flip side, families who are already wealthy and can afford to leave their 1,000 units untouched forever will naturally see much faster compounding. They'll let their dividend grow massively while paying for life out of external savings.
But the guardrails hold strong over the decades. By enforcing strict legal protections, private lenders or payday loan companies can never demand your NDHU as collateral. They are absolutely bankruptcy-proof. Even if a citizen faces massive civil judgments or penal convictions, judicial court fines are strictly capped at a maximum 50% deduction. So, the system ensures that court judgments can never drive a citizen into total destitution. They will always retain at least 500 units. Ultimately, it structurally aligns the capital interests of factory workers and billionaires, since both hold an identical stake in national productivity.
Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought. As labor productivity heavily shifts toward AI and robotics in the coming decades, corporate net revenues will scale dramatically, while traditional wage pools may drastically shrink. Perhaps a system like NDHU isn't just a fascinating thought experiment. Maybe it's the absolute blueprint required to capture the automated dividends of the future. By holding a non-dilutable stake in the aggregate profitability of the nation, every citizen automatically participates in the economic productivity of AI, without even needing to own private stock. Could this be the exact upgrade our economic operating system needs? It's a brilliant concept to unpack, and one that really redefines the very meaning of public wealth.